Welcome to the third of 4 videos in our series titled The Implementation of House Bill 22, Collaborating to Build a Better Accountability System. In this episode, we'll explore the school progress domain. The school progress domain is the second of 3 domains established by House Bill 22. When we think about school progress, we think about the impact that schools are having on students. How much are they growing? House Bill 22 establishes 2 ways to evaluate this. Student growth, how much has each individual student grown academically over the last year, longitudinal student growth. While this is really good information to have, this metric has some limitations. Because there are no STAAR tests until 3rd grade, we can't determine level of growth using this metric until 4th grade, and high schools have relatively few STAAR tests, so it's not a very effective measure there either. Then we have relative performance, and it's a different way of looking at growth by comparing the performance of similar campuses against each other. So we're going to start our exploration of the school progress domain by looking at Part A, student growth. First, what are we including in Part A? What tests do we have to make accurate conclusions about student growth? Part A includes all types of STAAR tests, those without accommodations and those with accommodations, and also STAAR Alternate 2. The subjects included are reading and mathematics, and we combine the tests. We don't report them separately. Part A takes into account the STAAR progress measure. That's the same one that we've been using for several years, except this year it's the same STAAR progress measure both for English learners and non-English learners. So we are no longer using the ELL progress measure in accountability. And this is new this year. So here are a few examples of how Part A works. The design of the new growth model is to reward students who achieve expected growth and also reward students who stay at the same performance level year over year even if they don't meet growth expectations. A student who is at the approaches grade level last year and achieves the meets grade level this year earns 1 point. A student who is at approaches grade level last year, stays at approaches grade level this year, but meets the STAAR progress measure also earns 1 point. A student who is at approaches grade level last year, stays at approaches grade level this year, but does not meet STAAR progress measure expectations, earns half a point for maintaining proficiency. And a student who moves to a lower performance level between years earns no points, with one small exception that we'll go over in a minute. We no longer award 2 points for exceeding STAAR progress measure expectations. This is very different from what we've done in recent years. This is new this year. Each test can earn 1 point, half a point, or no points, depending on proficiency level and whether the STAAR progress measure expectations were met. This matrix shows the 20 different possible outcomes for each test. There are 7 different ways to not earn any points. No points are awarded for not growing and not maintaining proficiency. There are 2 different ways to earn half a point. Half a point is awarded for maintaining proficiency even if the STAAR progress measure expectations are not met. And there are 11 different ways to earn 1 point. 1 point is awarded for meeting or exceeding the STAAR progress measure expectations or for achieving a higher proficiency level than last year. This is an example of how we calculate the score for Part A. Let's imagine the following scenario. A campus with 100 students, each of whom took both reading and mathematics STAAR tests last year and this year. That would give us 200 STAAR progress measures. That's the denominator. Of these 200 tests, 20 tests remained at the does not meet proficiency level and doesn't meet STAAR progress measure expectations. 15 went from the approaches grade level last year to does not meet this year. And 14 tests went from master's grade level last year to meets grade level this year. That's 49 tests that don't earn any points. 7 tests went from does not meet last year to approaches this year without meeting the STAAR progress measure expectations. And 10 tests stayed at the approaches grade level and did not meet the STAAR progress measure expectations. That's 17 tests that earn half a point. 23 tests stayed at the does not meet proficiency level but met the STAAR progress measure expectations. 7 tests fell from approaches grade level last year to does not meet this year, but met the STAAR progress measure expectations. This is actually quite rare, but it is possible, especially when a student skips a grade. 22 tests stayed at approaches grade level, but met the STAAR progress measure expectations. 33 tests stayed at meets grade level, 32 went from meets grade level last year to master's grade level this year, and 17 tests stayed at master's grade level. That's a total of 134 tests that earn 1 point. So here's how we add it up. 49 tests earn no points, plus 17 tests that earn half a point, plus 134 tests that earn 1 point, equals 142.5 points. Divide that by the total number of STAAR progress measures, 200, to get the score for Part A, 71. In this case, we loosely conclude that 71% of students have gained a year academically. Technically, however, it's the percentage of tests taken with some adjustment for maintaining proficiency. So here's the specific feedback that we're looking for. The new approach to growth. Is it the right direction? Are tweaks needed? And secondly, what percentage of students need to grow in order to show excellent performance? What about minimally acceptable performance? In the example that we use, 71% of students grew. The table on this slide shows how campuses and districts would have performed in 2017 had Part A been used in accountability. The highlighted row shows that at the 90th percentile, 82% of students in elementary schools showed growth, 78% in middle schools, 80% for K-12 campuses, and 77% for districts. So here are a few common questions that we get about Part A of this domain. Is there no additional credit for meeting or exceeding growth at the meets and master's levels? Well, students at the meet or master's level are given the same 1 point as students who show growth at the does not meet and approaches grade levels. Why are high schools only scored on relative performance? Is there no growth measure for high schools? Well, the relatively few STAAR progress measures in high school make them an unreliable measure of a high school's progress with students. So in the first year of the new accountability system, high schools, at least in this domain, will be rated on Part B, relative performance only. But the STAAR progress measures scores will be available on the Texas Academic Performance Report, also commonly known as the TAPER. So that's Part A. Now let's take a look at Part B, relative performance. The second part of the domain is relative performance, comparing the student achievement domain score against the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged, then comparing that performance against like campus types. The left axis is the score on the student achievement domain. For elementary schools and middle schools, STAAR is the only component. For high schools and districts, however, it also includes graduation rates and the college, career, and military readiness components. Along the bottom of this graph is the percentage of students who are considered economically disadvantaged. Each dot in this example represents an elementary campus. Where each one falls in the graph is determined by its score in the student achievement domain and its percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So how can we compare performance of the green dot campus against the red dot campus? It looks like the green dot is outperforming the red dot campus in terms of proficiency, but is that really true in terms of the impact it have on students? If we draw a line of best fit, it turns out that each campus is precisely average for all elementary campuses in Texas. We know that generally, a campus with fewer economically disadvantaged students has higher levels of student achievement, and generally, a campus with more economically disadvantaged students tends to have lower levels of student achievement. But poverty is not necessarily destiny. Look at the orange dot in the top right. This campus is clearly outstanding in school progress. The last thing we want to do is set up an accountability system that has low expectations for economically disadvantaged students. With the approach of Part B, we're able to identify the campuses that are really excelling at progress so we can learn from them. The schools at the top right in this plane are clearly A schools. The green dot and the red dot, they're not A schools in terms of school progress, even though the green dot has a high level of student achievement. Those campuses are just average. From the average line, the line of best fit, we draw bands that determine grades. We're still working to determine where the cut point should be. The slope of the lines will all be the same. The grades will be determined by how far and above or below the average line a district or campus falls. This is an area where we would like feedback. Where should the cut points be? When we run this for accountability, we're planning several different scatter plots, one for elementary schools, one for middle schools, one for high schools and K-12s, one for districts, and one for districts and campuses that are rated using alternative education accountability provisions. We've actually looked at whether to use other characteristics in addition to the percentage of economically disadvantaged students. English learners, for example, students served by special education. But research has shown that the one characteristic that matters more than any other is the percentage of economically disadvantaged students. So we're going to fix a distribution for the 2017-18 school year, setting the cut points, using data from the 2016-17 accountability. Then we'll hold those cut points static for up to 5 years. So here are common questions that we get about Part B of this domain. Does the student achievement domain score, the y-axis and relative performance, include college, career, and military readiness indicators and graduation rates? Yes, it does for schools and districts that have that data. House Bill 22 states that the method used to evaluate performance should provide for the mathematical possibility that all districts and campuses receive an A. But this looks like a forced distribution that guarantees a set percentage of schools will get D's and F's. Well, once the cut points are set using accountability data from the 2016 and 17 school year, the cut points will stay fixed for 5 years. That way, it is mathematically possible for every district and campus to earn an A. Here's a little more detailed explanation of how Part B will work. We build a scatter plot of each district and campus that compares the score in the student achievement domain against the percentage of students who are considered economically disadvantaged. We draw a line of best fit and have sliding cut scores based on the distance above or below the line. We will have different scatter plots for elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, K-12s, districts and campuses that are rated using alternative education accountability provisions. The cut points will be set using data from 2016-17 accountability and are intended to stay fixed for 5 years, and the cut points will be known before ratings release. So here's a sample calculation. The cut points will be based on the slope-intercept form that we're all familiar with from either 8th grade math or algebra 1, y equals mx plus b. Y is the predicted student achievement domain score. X is the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. M is the slope of the trend line or average line or line of best fit. B is the distance from the trend line, and it is based on average variance from the trend line. So let's look at this sample middle school. At this middle school, 94.4% of its students are considered economically disadvantaged. We plug that number into the predetermined equation based on campus type, and when we do that, we discover that the predicted student achievement domain is 31. That means, on average, in this example, middle schools that have 94.4% of economically disadvantaged students had a student achievement domain score of 31. The actual student achievement domain score of this middle school was a 25. So their score in Part B, relative performance of the school progress domain, is a D. So this slide shows all of the feedback that we're asking for related to this domain. The first 3 bullets are for Part A, and they're the same ones that we saw a little bit earlier. The specific feedback that we're looking for related to Part B is the cut points. What are the right cut points to show excellent performance or unacceptable performance? Well, that concludes our look at the school progress domain. We certainly hope that you'll give us lots of feedback. In fact, we have an email address set up specifically for that. We also have other resources available for you. We have a web page that's specifically dedicated to the development of the A through F system. We have resources on our website related to accountability more generally. And we also have, you see our email address and phone number there in case you'd like to contact us with any questions. So thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next episode where we explore the Closing the Gaps domain.